Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Let's zoom into a scene that sounds like it's straight out of a sitcom, only it's real life and it's happening at the Kremlin. Here's a fun fact: nothing rattles an autocrat like its own country being treated like a drive-thru. Picture this: Ukrainian forces casually roll into Russia, and suddenly Putin's not the chess grandmaster he likes to style himself. He's more like a guy who lost his rook, his queen, and is left playing with just a couple of panic pawns. In what could be a scene from The Office, Putin casually cut up the governor of Kursk mid-sentence during a report on the depth of enemy advancement into the region. Because why listen to bad news when you can just live in blissful ignorance, right? It's like Putin's version of la 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 la, I can't hear you. Now, Putin's response is a classic deflection. Everything is according to plan. Well, if the plan was to showcase a masterclass in losing one's composure and then pretending you haven't, then bravo.
Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья, дамы и господа, товарищи. Здравствуйте. В прямом эфире ваша любимая программа «60 минут о самом главном». Начинаем с важнейших заявлений Путина о ситуации в Курской области. Президент заявил, что киевский режим получит жесточайший ответ на провокации. Минобороны должно выбить противника с нашей земли. Ключевое: никаких переговоров с преступным режимом теперь точно не будет. Слушаем Путина.
Главная задача стоит, безусловно, перед Министерством обороны. Выбить противника с наших территорий и совместно с пограничной службой обеспечить надежное прикрытие госграницы. Судя по всему, противник при помощи своих западных хозяев, он выполняет их волю, и руками украинцев Запад с нами воюет. Так вот, судя по всему, противник стремится к улучшению своих переговорных позиций в будущем. Но о каких переговорах вообще может идти речь с людьми, которые без разбора наносят удары по мирным людям, по гражданской инфраструктуре, либо пытаются создать угрозы для объектов ядерной энергетики? О чем с ними вообще можно говорить? Противник, безусловно, получит достойный ответ.
And mission accomplished, Vlad is the geopolitical equivalent of "I really meant to do that" after tripping over your own shoelaces. Truly, a leader who can stand in the ruins of his own policies and still say "all good, totally meant that" deserves some kind of award, or at least a reality check. Continuing the episode of Putin Pretends Everything is Fine, a classic in the genre of political fantasy, here's our dear friend, Comrade Tsar Putin, demanding the Russian Defense Ministry to shove Ukrainian forces back across the border, if it was only that easy.
Главари киевского режима не только совершают преступления против российского народа, но, по сути, встали на путь и истребления самих украинцев, украинского народа, которого своим, судя по всему, уже и не считают. Потери вооруженных сил Украины драматически для них увеличиваются, в том числе среди наиболее боеспособных частей и подразделений, которые противник перебрасывает к нашей границе. Противник, безусловно, получит достойный ответ, а все цели, стоящие перед нами, вне всяких сомнений, будут достигнуты.
And as the theater of the absurd continues, Putin's rallying cry to the FSB and Roskovdia to more effectively combat roving sabotage units sound more like a middle manager pep talk during a particularly aggressive quarterly sales meeting. Evaluate the events, he says. Sure, because what's a little uninvited incursion among neighbors, right? Now, for the punchline, despite Ukrainian forces making themselves at home a little too deep into Russia for comfort, Putin insists, what negotiations can we talk about with them? A classic Putin negotiating with the finesse of a sledgehammer. And amidst all of this, he claims that the pace of Russian offensive operation has not just been maintained, but even increased 150%. If mathematics were a person, it would sue for defamation at this point. But don't worry, according to Putin, these attacks won't cause social unrest in Russia. Why? Because apparently Russians have shown solidarity with fleeing refugees, and there's a surge of recruits to the army. Solidarity, or was it sheer panic? And let's just gently gloss over the cries for help from his own citizens about the lack of evacuation and support, because why let reality spoil a good narrative? In the world, according to Putin, everything is just peachy, or at least that's a script until someone accidentally reads the actual news. And for now, another thrilling episode of Russian Propagandist predicting the apocalypse. This week, our favorite doommongers are heating up their audiences for the next big Ukrainian offensive, which they assure us will happen sometime between the end of August and early September. And this isn't just any offensive, no, this one apparently includes severing the land corridor to Crimea and launching a massive F-16 strike on the Crimean bridge. Talk about escalation.
В конце августа, в начале сентября, я думаю, что будет еще более крупномасштабная наступательная операция со стороны Украины. Не исключено, что это будет на юге. Опять же будут пытаться перерезать сухопутный коридор к Крыму. Возможно, часть этого наступления в том числе уйдет в сторону Запорожской атомной электростанции, потому что перекрытие сухопутного коридора в Крым вместе с массированным ударом самолетов F-16 по Крымскому мосту, это вот тот образ победы, который Белый дом сможет продать избирателям. Они будут стремиться к этому. И сейчас Курская область должна вытянуть на себя часть наших резервов, которых еще нет на фронте, которые мы не сможем потом резко перебросить на Запорожскую или там Херсонскую область. Поэтому нужно, ну скажем так, я стараюсь здесь, чтобы не было таких слишком у нас легких позиций, что мы сейчас их выдавим, действительно. И задачу они себе как раз ставили вот на какой-то небольшой короткий период. Возможно, они сами начнут отходить, если мы не успеем захлопнуть бутылочное горлышко, а риски такие есть, что мы их возьмем там в окружение.
Now, with the way things are going on in Kursk, it shouldn't be surprising that the nerves are starting to get to our favorite Kremlin mouthpieces, leaving them a little shaky in the knees. Because if Kyiv's troops not only managed to punch through Russian borders, mostly undeterred, but are now making themselves at home on nearly 1,000 square kilometers of Russian soil, it's not exactly beyond the realm of possibility that the Crimean bridge would be the next target, right? After all, seems way more within arm's reach than a cross-border incursion into Russia. Now let's take a closer look into China's latest attempt to play the role of the world's most reasonable adult in the room, which is a bit like a pyromaniac offering to help out the fire they just started. But let's dive into their statement, shall we? China has reviewed the situation, which is bureaucraties for we've seen the news, and they urge everyone to adhere to the principles of de-escalation, which is also delightfully vague. It's sort of like saying everyone should be nice without suggesting how to deal with that one friend who keeps poking the bear, or in this case, the dragon. Now, the real cherry on top is China calling for a solution that does not expand the battlefield or escalate the war. Coming from a country that spends 7.5% of its colossal GDP on the military, that's like your friend who just bought a Humvee telling you to consider the environment. And let's not overlook their commitment to playing a constructive role in facilitating political solutions to crisis and conflicts. If history is any guide, China's version of being constructive usually involves building islands in disputed waters or lending money in a way that screams less helpful neighbor and more mob loan shark. So as we watch China adorn its peacemaker feathers, let's remember, when they say that they're working to prevent escalation, it might just mean that they want everyone else to stop making waves while they quietly reshape the geopolitical landscape. Or as they might put it, just trust us, we're from the government. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.